Anthony Fauci helped arrange for the drug companies to get access to children in foster homes in 7 states.
There was a children's center in New York, in the Bronx, called Incarnation Center, where foster children or children who were considered to have AIDS through PCR tests that were inaccurate were put in this medical center, and they were used for experimental drugs.
Some of the children were infants. Some of the children were not even HIV positive. Fauci, together with pharmaceutical companies, sponsored these experiments. I use the terminology that's used in the Nuremberg Code. These are experiments. They're not studies. These are invasive experiments.
Some of the trials, some of the protocols say that the children are, and I quote, presumed to be HIV positive. Now, what kind of society are we that children who are only presumed, and by whom are they presumed? What criteria makes them presumed to be HIV, that those children then get exposed to as many as 7 highly toxic experimental drugs?
And what I uncovered was that the promise that Dr. Fauci and his team made to these foster children agencies is for every child that you allow to enroll in this, we're going to give them an advocate, a patient advocate, to watch their well-being like their parents, because they're disconnected from their parents when you're a foster child. This patient advocate will watch the data, they'll be briefed, and they'll protect that child's personal and safety interests as they go through this, very toxic drug trial. And it turns out that in almost all those cases, the NIAID, Fauci's division, didn't provide that advocate after the fact. And the ultimate investigation concluded that these were unexplained, mysterious deaths that were very troubling because of the fact that NIAID had not given them the protections of an advocate, somebody to watch out and be that child's parent as these drugs were being administered to. So very much like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment in the 40s.
In 92, the NIH decided that this population was going to be as good as any to test drugs on.
Aren't there rules against testing on children?
Yes, there are.
Under federal rules, consent for children to take part in drug trials has to be given by their parent or guardian. But the kids at Incarnation have no independent voice. The body that is their legal guardian, the ACS, is the same body that makes the children available for trials.
National Institute of Health rules against using wards of the state in clinical trials. But
how did they get around this?
Well, you get around it by appealing to public sympathy. If you go with the definition of AIDS that we have, which is a single cause, illness with no cure, blah blah blah, caused by one thing, instead of what it appears to be, the multifactorial, complex, treatable illness that occurs around the world because of poverty, drug toxicity, and other things. If you go with the first view, you can do anything you want.
So basically they're saying these babies have a death sentence anyway. It doesn't matter what we do. We can just do anything we need to do.
We're saving their lives.
Well, it is shocking that in New York City, experimental drug treatments are being used on children who are in foster care.
Even senior politicians in the city have found it impossible to get information about the trials. Bill Perkins is Deputy Majority Leader on New York City Council.
We do know that several have passed away during the course of these experiments, and we know that there are still some involved. And there's been somewhat of a secrecy about the whole matter, I must say. It has not been easy to get through the bureaucracy as to exactly what this is all about.
We're using toxic drugs on infants. We're using toxic drugs on children. Toxic drugs that cause genetic mutation, organ failure, bone marrow death, bodily deformations, brain damage, and fatal skin disorders. We're using that on orphans.
For months we tried to get answers from those behind the trials. From Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, where many of the tests were devised. From Incarnation Children's Center, from the Catholic Church, and from the ACS, the authority ultimately responsible.
If the children wouldn't take the drugs by mouth, then they would put in a gastric tube.
Some of the older children refused to take the drugs that were given to them because they were so horrible. So they surgically inserted a feeding tube in their tummies so that they couldn't resist.
And many of these children died. A potter's grave of 80 children. And these were all children of color.
My assignment was to go there, so I did. I went to Hawthorne, New York, and I located this grave site. And what it looks like if you're standing before it, it was a semicircle of large tombstones with names engraved on the tombstones. I remember there were stuffed animals and flowers and hearts and things adorning those tombstones. And I also remember there were flies buzzing around. There was a mound, a gigantic hole in the ground covered by AstroTurf. And it wasn't nailed down, it was just covered. And I went over and I took a corner of the AstroTurf, and I remember, my heart was pounding. I lifted it up, and inside was just a lot of coffins. They were in there haphazardly. And apparently there was more than one child in each coffin.
The drug companies which have supported trials at Incarnation include some of the world's largest. They also refuse to be interviewed for this program. Officials at the National Institutes for Health insist that any participation of children in drug trials should be voluntary in every sense.
These little children are regarded as throwaway children. Nothing really was done to punish those who broke the law.